In 1884, a widow bought a 6-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. By the time she died, 38 years later, that farmhouse had become a 160-room mansion with over 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, and staircases that lead directly into ceilings. Construction never stopped. Not once in 38 years. Carpenters worked in shifts around the clock, 7 days a week, for nearly 4 decades. Her name was Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester repeating arms fortune. And according to the story that has followed this house for over a century, she believed that if the building ever stopped, she would die. This is the Winchester Mystery House. And this is what's documented about the woman who built it, and what the people who've worked inside it since have reported experiencing. Let's start with the loss that began it all. Story number 1. The Warning. Sarah Pardee married William Wirt Winchester in 1862. William was the heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the firearms manufacturer that had made the family one of the wealthiest in America. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Annie. Annie died just over a month later, from a condition that doctors at the time could not treat. Sarah reportedly withdrew from public life for years afterward. In 1881, William Winchester died of tuberculosis. Sarah inherited an enormous fortune. Accounts vary, but historical estimates place her inheritance, combined with ongoing company dividends, at roughly $20 million, an almost incomprehensible sum in the 1880s. According to the story that has been told about Sarah Winchester for more than 100 years, passed down through her household staff, and later popularized by the tour operators who opened her house to the public after her death, Sarah, grieving and searching for answers, consulted a Boston medium. The medium, according to this account, told her that her family was cursed. That the spirits of everyone ever killed by a Winchester rifle, in wars, in violence, in the settling of the American West, were responsible for the deaths in her own family, and that they would come for her next. The medium's alleged solution: move west, and build a house for the spirits. Build continuously. Never stop. As long as construction continued, Sarah would be protected. I want to be direct about something here, because it matters. This exact story, the medium, the specific warning, comes from a single oral tradition, not from any letter or diary of Sarah Winchester's that has survived. Historians who've studied her life note that she left no writing confirming this was her actual belief or motivation. What is not in dispute is what she did next. In 1884, Sarah Winchester purchased an unfinished 6-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. She began construction. And for the next 38 years, until the day she died, it did not stop. Story number 2. The House That Never Stopped. By the time of Sarah Winchester's death in 1922, the house, now known as Lanada Villa, had grown to an estimated 160 rooms, spread across 7 stories in places, with 2,000 doors and 10,000 windows. Carpenters worked around the clock, in shifts 7 days a week. Sarah reportedly paid premium wages specifically so that construction would never have a reason to pause. The house has no master blueprint. Historians and architects who've studied it agree that it was never designed as a coherent whole. Additions were built onto additions, rooms added onto rooms, seemingly without any overarching plan. The results, still standing today, are documented and can be seen by any visitor who tours the house. A staircase with 7 flights and 44 steps that rises a total of only 9 feet, a switchback design so convoluted it barely gains any height at all. Doors that open directly onto blank walls. Doors that open onto 2-story drops with no stairs or landing beyond them. A chimney that rises through the house and stops 2 feet short of the roof, never actually venting anywhere. The number 13 appears throughout the house with a consistency that visitors and historians alike have noted for decades. Staircases with 13 steps. A greenhouse with 13 cupolas. Windows built with 13 panes of glass. A bathroom with 13 windows and 1 sink. In 1906, the Great San Francisco earthquake struck the region. Sarah Winchester was reportedly trapped for several hours in a bedroom on an upper floor after a tower collapsed and blocked the door. She survived. Afterward, she reportedly ordered the front 30 rooms of the house sealed off entirely and never used again. Some accounts say she interpreted the earthquake as a sign of the spirit's displeasure, specifically with the ostentation of the house's front rooms. Construction continued elsewhere in the house for another 16 years, until the night Sarah Winchester died in her sleep, in September 1922. The carpenters, according to accounts collected afterward, stopped mid-task. A partially driven nail was reportedly left in a wall in an unfinished room, exactly where it was when construction ceased. Story number 3. The Séance Room. At the center of the house's most confusing section is a small room accessible only by navigating a deliberately disorienting sequence of hallways and switchback turns, a room historians and tour guides refer to as the Séance Room. According to the accounts passed down by household staff, Sarah Winchester retreated to this room alone, reportedly around midnight most nights, to commune with spirits, and, some versions of the story claim, to receive architectural instructions for the next day's construction. The room has 13 hooks along one wall, reportedly for 13 ceremonial robes she is said to have kept for these sessions, though, again, this detail comes from oral tradition rather than any surviving written record from Sarah Winchester herself. What can be verified is the room's construction. It is one of the most deliberately difficult to reach spaces in the entire house, and appears to have been designed specifically to be hard to find, even for people otherwise familiar with the home. Tour guides and staff who have worked in the house in recent decades report a consistent pattern in visitor reactions, specifically in this section of the house. A disproportionate number of visitors, independently and without prompting from guides, describe a feeling of disorientation beyond what the architecture alone would explain, a sense, some report, of losing track of time, or briefly forgetting which direction they'd come from, even when retracing a route they just walked minutes earlier. Staff attribute this, when asked directly, most likely to the deliberately confusing floor plan itself. It's worth noting they say so plainly, rather than encouraging a supernatural explanation, a level of restraint that's fairly unusual for a paid tourist attraction. Sarah Winchester died on September 5, 1922, in the house she had spent 38 uninterrupted years building. Her will divided her fortune among relatives and staff, and specifically instructed that the house's contents be sold off, with most of her personal belongings auctioned rather than kept intact, an instruction some biographers have read as a final act of a woman who wanted the house itself, more than her possessions, to be the thing that remained. The house was purchased shortly after her death, and opened to the public in 1923 as a tourist attraction, a role it has held continuously for a century. Staff who have worked at the property in the decades since, maintenance workers, overnight security, tour guides closing up after the last group of the day, have provided the accounts that circulate most consistently today. Reports of a cold, specific draft in the séance room with no identifiable source, given the room has no exterior windows. The sound of hammering, reported by multiple security staff over separate decades, coming from unoccupied sections of the house after closing, in a building with no ongoing construction of any kind since 1922. And most consistently across the longest span of time, staff describing a sense of simply being watched while alone in the house after hours, most often in the older, original sections built in the years immediately following Sarah Winchester's move to California. None of these accounts have been independently verified by any controlled investigation. All of them have been reported, consistently, by multiple staff members across multiple decades, in a building where the woman who built it spent 38 years insisting that stopping was the one thing she could not afford to do. A widow, grieving, told, according to 100 years of retelling, that she would only be safe as long as she never stopped building. 38 years. 160 rooms. A staircase that rises 9 feet in 7 flights. A nail, driven halfway into a wall, left exactly where it was the moment construction finally, permanently stopped. Whether you believe the medium's warning was real, or a story that grew larger with every year it was retold, one thing about this house isn't up for debate. She never stopped. Not once. Not for 38 years. If you've visited a place like this, somewhere the history is stranger than the legend, I want to hear about it. New stories every Friday. Subscribe. Some people build to leave something behind. She may have built simply so nothing could catch up to her.